I never imagined my own parents would choose my sister's college tour over sitting by my hospital bed. I had a broken leg, a totaled car, and a crushed heart. That was the night I realized I wasn't their daughter, I was just the other one. My name is Madison. I'm 28 years old. I live alone in Seattle and work as a physical therapist at Memorial Hospital. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who got straight A's, followed every rule, and helped out without being asked. I never caused trouble. I never needed saving. My younger sister Bailey was the opposite. She was wild, outgoing, and always in some kind of trouble, but our parents treated her like the golden child. Everything Bailey did was exciting, important, and special, even when she failed. Everything I did was expected, invisible, even when I succeeded. I should have seen it coming. The pattern had been there my whole life. When I was 16, I saved money from babysitting jobs to buy a secondhand laptop for school. When Bailey turned 16, she got a brand new MacBook Pro just because she said she wanted to be a photographer. My high school graduation happened the same weekend as Bailey's soccer tournament. My parents flew across the country to watch her game. I walked across the stage and received my diploma with only my grandmother in the audience. That night, my dad called and said, "We're so proud of you, Madison." But Bailey's tournament could get her noticed by college scouts. "Your graduation was just a ceremony. You still got the diploma, right?" That sentence stayed with me for years. Just a ceremony, just like I was just the other daughter. Even as adults, nothing changed. I put myself through college with scholarships and night shifts at the library. Bailey dropped out of 3 different programs, and every time our parents paid for new classes, new housing, new equipment. When I asked why, Mom said Bailey needs more support. "You've always been so independent," as if my independence was a choice, as if I hadn't spent my whole life learning to live without their help. Still, I stayed quiet. I showed up for holidays, I bought them birthday gifts, I listened to stories about Bailey's latest trip or hobby. I helped her move apartments, twice. I never made a scene, I never demanded more. Then, the accident happened. It was a rainy Thursday night close to midnight. I had just finished a long shift at the hospital. I thought about stopping at the grocery store but decided to head straight home instead. That small choice probably saved my life. 10 minutes from my apartment, I stopped at a red light. I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror coming fast. Before I could react, a pickup truck ran the red light and slammed into the driver's side of my car. The sound was deafening. Metal crunching, glass breaking, my car spinning out into the intersection. When it stopped, I was still conscious, but in pain. I couldn't move my leg. Everything felt distant, foggy. Later, the doctors told me my tibia was fractured in 2 places. I had a concussion, bruised ribs, and a sprained wrist. But what hurt most wasn't my body. It was what happened after. I expected my parents to come rushing to the hospital. I expected my mom to hold my hand, my dad to sit by my side, even just for a few hours. But instead, I got a text. "You'll heal, but your sister's future is time sensitive." That was all my mother wrote. Hours later, another message came through. A selfie of my parents standing beside Bailey in her college dorm, all smiles. The caption read, "So proud of our baby girl starting her journey." I stared at the screen, my face swollen and scratched, my leg in a cast, machines beeping beside me. That selfie made everything clear. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just poor timing. It was a choice. They had chosen Bailey, again, and I had finally had enough. Lying there, drugged and alone, something inside me snapped. I stopped crying. I stopped caring. The pain turned into clarity. My parents weren't going to change. They had built their whole world around Bailey, and I was just the shadow in the background. I wasn't bitter toward my sister. She was just playing the role they gave her. But I was done pretending it didn't hurt. I realized something else too. If I could survive this accident, I could survive without them. I had been trying for years to prove I was worthy of their attention. But I didn't need to prove anything. I had built my own life. My apartment, my job, my friendships. Those were real. I was enough, even if they never saw it. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. No more waiting for calls that never came. No more chasing people who only saw me when it was convenient. From now on, I would stop asking for space in their lives and start claiming space in my own. Because sometimes when your family leaves you behind, the best thing you can do is leave them there. The first night I got home from the hospital, everything felt different. My apartment, once my peaceful space, now felt like a battlefield. The crutches leaned awkwardly against the door. My leg throbbed with every step I tried to take. I had bandages on my arms and scratches on my face that the mirror couldn't hide. But none of that hurt more than the silence from my parents. They hadn't called, not once. Bailey posted pictures from her dorm move-in on Instagram. My parents were in the background of every photo, helping her hang lights and unpack boxes. They looked happy, relaxed, like nothing had happened, like their other daughter hadn't nearly died just 2 days earlier. I lay on my couch that night, leg propped up with pillows, and stared at my phone. I didn't want them to call anymore. I wanted them to notice the silence and wonder why. I wanted them to feel, even just for a second, what I had felt my whole life, but I knew they wouldn't. A few days later, I returned to the hospital for a follow-up. I had to take a rideshare because I couldn't drive. One of my coworkers, Jenna, met me at the entrance and wheeled me inside. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Are your parents coming out to help?" I didn't know what to say. I forced a smile and told her, "They're busy with my sister's school stuff." She raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Maybe she knew, maybe she understood. After the appointment, I sat in the waiting area while Jenna went to get the car. A woman nearby was arguing with her teenage son about turning down the volume on his phone. They looked frustrated, annoyed with each other, but they were there together. I had never felt so alone. When I got home that night, I opened my journal and wrote something in big letters across the page. No one is coming, so I'm going to show up for myself. It became my new rule. That week, I hired a part-time home aide using my own savings. Her name was Angela. She came every morning to help me get dressed, prepare meals, and clean the apartment. She was kind, efficient, and didn't ask many questions. But she made me feel human again. On the 5th day, while helping me into the shower chair, she asked quietly, "Do you have family nearby?" I paused, then I said yes, but they're not the kind who show up. Angela didn't say anything. She just nodded and handed me the towel. I started doing small things to rebuild my strength. I followed my physical therapy schedule exactly, even when it hurt. I practiced walking with crutches until I could make it from the kitchen to the balcony without resting. I even started working from home, doing video consults with my patients. It was exhausting, but it made me feel useful again. One night while scrolling through my phone, I saw a text from Bailey. Just one sentence. "Hey, hope you're feeling better." No emojis, no follow-up, no call. Another day passed, then another. Finally, I got a message in the family group chat. It was my mom. She said, "We were thinking of driving up next weekend. Bailey wants to see the city. Maybe we can grab dinner." No apology, no "how are you," just a casual dinner suggestion as if everything was normal. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for being angry. I didn't feel the need to make things easy for them. I didn't owe them grace they never gave me. So I replied with something simple. "Thanks, but I won't be available. Hope Bailey enjoys her visit." No one replied. The silence felt powerful. A few nights later, Jenna invited me to a small get-together at her place. Just coworkers. Snacks. Nothing wild. I almost said no. I still felt sore both physically and emotionally. But something inside me whispered, "You need this." I showed up in a long sweater, one crutch under my arm. People were surprised to see me, but in a good way. They made space for me, brought me food, and asked how I was really doing. Not out of obligation, but because they cared. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. I didn't talk about my family. I didn't need to. Just being surrounded by people who treated me like I mattered was enough. On the ride home, I looked out the window at the passing streetlights and thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. Not big moments, just small steps toward a better life. When I got home, I made a decision. I opened my phone and muted the family group chat. I unfollowed Bailey's Instagram. I took a deep breath and let go of the need for their approval. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the woman who chose herself. 3 weeks after the accident, I was finally able to walk short distances without crutches. My leg was still stiff, and some days the pain returned like an old memory I couldn't forget. But I was stronger now. I could feel it, not just in my muscles but in my heart. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the text about dinner. The silence between us had stretched into a canyon. I thought maybe they'd check in eventually. They didn't. Not once. But one Thursday afternoon, I got a call from my mom. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to answer. Something inside me said, "This is your moment." So I took a breath and picked up. Her voice was bright, too bright. "Hey sweetheart, we were just talking about you last night. Bailey got picked to help with freshman orientation next semester. Isn't that exciting?" I waited. Not "how are you?" Not "are you recovering okay?" Just another update about Bailey. I replied quietly, "That's great for her." There was a short silence on the line. Then she added, "We were thinking maybe we'd come up next weekend after all. Bailey wants to take some photos in the city, and I figured you might like some company." The way she said it, it wasn't about me. It never was. "I don't need company," I said. My voice was calm, but I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "Not from people who couldn't bother to show up when I almost died." She gasped softly like I'd slapped her. "Madison, that's not fair. We were with Bailey. It was a big weekend for her." I cut her off. I was alone in a hospital bed, on morphine, in pain. "You chose a dorm room selfie over your daughter's life." She went quiet. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not anymore. I've spent my whole life being the backup plan. The afterthought. You only remember me when Bailey doesn't need you. I got promoted last year. You barely noticed. I graduated with honors. You weren't even there. I was hit by a truck and you chose Bailey's college over me. What exactly would it take for you to choose me first? There was a long pause on the other end. Finally, she whispered, "We didn't think you needed us. You've always been so strong." My throat tightened. I wasn't strong. I was just alone. You never gave me a choice. Another silence. Then she said, "We didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't have to mean it," I replied. "You just had to see it and you never did." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor, breathing hard. That conversation took everything out of me.
But in that moment I realized something. I had been waiting my whole life for my parents to understand me, to see me, to apologize, but maybe they never would, and maybe that was okay. That night I opened my laptop and did something I had thought about for years. I started writing down everything. The accident, the hospital, the dorm room selfie, my childhood, the times they forgot my birthday, the way they always said I was the strong one as an excuse to ignore me. Page after page I wrote, not because I needed revenge, but because my story mattered, even if they never acknowledged it.
A few days later, I got an email from my dad. The subject line was, "We're sorry." The message was short, no real apology, just, "We didn't realize how much we'd hurt you. We thought you'd understand. We love you." I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is louder than any answer. Instead, I printed the email, folded it, put it in the same drawer where I'd kept all the birthday cards they never sent. That drawer had been empty for years. Now it held something real, even if it wasn't what I had hoped for. That weekend, I went to a community art class. I painted for the first time in years. Nothing fancy, just shapes and colors. I met people who didn't know about my family, who didn't care what I'd done or what I'd been through. They just saw me, and I saw myself. I wasn't the forgotten child anymore. I was the woman who chose to stop waiting. I was the one who spoke up, even when her voice trembled. I was becoming someone new. And this time, it wasn't for them. It was for me. It had been over a month since the phone call with my mom, since I said the things I had carried inside me for years. At first, it felt like I'd ripped something open that I couldn't close again. But slowly, the silence that followed began to feel like peace. No more pretending, no more waiting for them to show up. I kept going to the community art class every Saturday. I painted and laughed with strangers who never asked about my family, just about my favorite colors, or which brush I liked best. I began to notice little changes in myself. My shoulders weren't always tense. I slept better. My apartment felt brighter. For once, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. One afternoon after class, I stopped by a local cafe. I ordered an iced chai and found a quiet table near the window. As I took a sip and opened my book, someone tapped on my shoulder. I turned around and there was Bailey. She looked the same and different all at once. Her long blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, no makeup, wearing a hoodie I recognized from high school, but her eyes looked tired, unsure. "Hey," she said, almost a whisper. I blinked. "Bailey, what are you doing here?" She hesitated, holding her cup with both hands like it was a shield. "I've been staying with a friend nearby. I heard you were in this area. I wanted to talk." I didn't say anything. She sat down across from me. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said quietly. "What you went through. The accident. Mom and Dad told me you were fine, that it was just a broken leg. They didn't say you were alone." I stared at her. "Why didn't you call me?" She looked down. I didn't know what to say, and I thought maybe you didn't want to talk to me. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, something like relief. "I didn't blame you," I said slowly. "Not at first. You were the favorite. I got that. You didn't create the pattern, but you didn't challenge it either." She looked up. "I didn't know how. Every time I messed up, they just fixed it, paid for it, made excuses. It felt like they expected me to need saving. And you, they treated you like you didn't need anything. They didn't even come to the hospital," I whispered. "I know," she said. "When I saw the photo Mom posted, the one from my dorm, I thought you were okay. But when I found out the truth, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About you, lying there alone." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." I took a deep breath. "I'm still healing, Bailey, and I don't know if things can go back to how they were. I don't want them to," she said quickly. "I want something better. I want to be your sister, for real, not just someone who shows up when it's easy." We sat in silence for a few moments, sipping our drinks. Outside, people passed by without knowing who we were, what we carried. The world moved on. But inside that cafe, something small began to shift. "I'm not asking you to fix what Mom and Dad broke," I said. "But if you want to show up for me now, that's a start." "I do," she said. We made a plan to meet again next week. No pressure, just a walk in the park. It felt strange opening the door even a little, but I realized something important. It wasn't weakness to give someone a chance. It was strength to know your boundaries and still leave room for growth. That night, I walked home feeling a little lighter. The scar on my leg still ached sometimes, especially when it rained. But scars mean healing. They mean survival. I no longer waited for my parents to see me. I didn't need their approval or their attention. I had given them enough chances. But my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about choosing peace over pain, choosing truth over silence, and maybe, just maybe, choosing connection over pride. Even if it starts with a single conversation across a cafe table. The holidays were coming. Every year my parents hosted Thanksgiving dinner at their big house in the suburbs. Growing up, I always helped with the cooking, while Bailey picked out the playlist or decorated the table. It was tradition, familiar, comfortable in all the wrong ways. This year I wasn't planning to go. I had already made a reservation at a small restaurant that offered a Thanksgiving for one menu. It felt like the right way to spend the day. Quiet, peaceful, without the weight of fake smiles and forced conversations. But then Bailey called. I know you don't want to come, she said, and I don't blame you, but I think you should. Not for them, for you. You've stayed quiet for so long. Maybe it's time they hear you. I didn't answer right away. I'd done so much work to heal. I wasn't sure if going back into that house would move me forward or pull me under again. Still, something in me said I was ready, so I said yes. I arrived with a store-bought pie and my head held high. The house smelled the same. Warm spices, cranberry sauce, turkey, but the energy felt different. Or maybe I did. My parents looked surprised when they opened the door. They smiled like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't spent a month in recovery without them. Like I hadn't disappeared from their lives for weeks. Madison, my mom said, hugging me quickly. I'm so glad you came. Bailey told us you might. I gave a polite smile and stepped inside. Dinner was what you'd expect. Laughter, wine, stories. Most of them about Bailey's latest job interview or some trip she wanted to take. My parents beamed like proud parents do. I listened quietly, carving my turkey as if I wasn't invisible. But inside, something was building. Then Bailey cleared her throat. Actually, she said, setting down her fork, I think Madison has something she wants to say. All eyes turned to me. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Every nerve told me to shut it down. Smile, change the subject. But I didn't. I wiped my hands on my napkin and stood up. I wasn't going to come today, I said, because I didn't think I was welcome. Not really. Not in a way that counts. My mother blinked. Sweetheart, of course you're welcome. I held up my hand. Calm, clear, strong. Please let me finish. They went quiet. I've spent years trying to earn a place in this family. I got straight A's, worked through college, built my career, paid my bills. I did everything right, but it was never enough. No matter what I achieved, I was always in Bailey's shadow. You gave her your time, your money, your attention. You left me in a hospital bed after a car accident because you thought her orientation was more important than my life. I saw the tears start in my mother's eyes, but I kept going. I've tried to forgive you for that, for a lot of things, and maybe I will, but I need you to hear this. I am not the backup daughter. I am not the strong one just because I had to survive without help. I am a whole person, and I will not let your choices define my worth anymore. The room was completely still. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. My dad looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Bailey nodded at me with a quiet, steady look. I sat down. No one clapped. No one cheered. But for the first time in my life, I felt seen. After dessert, I didn't stay. I took my coat, thanked Bailey softly, and walked out into the cold night. The sky was clear. The stars were bright. As I drove home, I thought about how long I had waited for a moment like that. To say everything that needed to be said. Not in anger, but in truth. And the best part, I didn't need anything from them anymore. Not approval, not attention, not even an apology. I had given myself closure. Weeks later, Bailey came to visit. We had dinner, watched a movie, and laughed like sisters should. She didn't try to fix the past. She just stayed present. That was enough. One afternoon, I got a card in the mail. It was from my mom. A short note. I'm sorry we weren't there when you needed us. We didn't see how much we were hurting you, but we see it now. Thank you for speaking your truth. Love, Mom. I didn't cry. I just placed the card in the drawer with the email from my dad. Not as proof that they had changed, but as a reminder that I had. Because this story, it didn't end in pain. It ended in power, and that power was mine.